Alright, it's time for our next flipped classroom video. You guys already remember how to do these. You've been given a worksheet in class, and if you've already lost it, you can go to the class website and reprint another one for you. The worksheet is a guided notes activity, so it's going to have some fill-in-the-blank options as well as some independent practice that you have to do yourself. Today's notes are going to be on metaphors and similes, and they're an important part of figurative language, which you guys are going to learn about in just a moment. As always, if you have any questions, you can always pause, rewind, rewatch the video, or email me if you have any questions at all along the way. First up is our main question. What is a metaphor? Well, a metaphor is a comparison of two unlike things without using the words like or as. That sounds a little complicated at first, but it won't be once I give you a little bit of an example. Here are some examples right here. The girl's eyes were diamonds sparkling in the sky. That's a metaphor because it's going to explain how the girl's eyes were similar to diamonds, but it does not say like or as. It's directly comparing the two. Our second example is the trees were towering giants looking over the vulnerable flowers. We all know that trees aren't realistically giants. They're not going to be 80-foot tall dudes with sandals on, because that's how they're always shown in movies. But instead, it's giving an example of how trees are like giants in their height. And number three, the fart was a bomb, exploding every now and then. We all know that if a human being had a fart that was truly a bomb, they would die. So a metaphor is somewhat of an exaggeration in most cases, but it's used to describe how something is similar to another thing. No one really thinks a fart is a bomb, but it's a great example to show how impactful the gas was. It's okay, you can laugh. Okay, so for metaphors, what you're going to do on your guided notes sheet now is you're going to press pause and you're going to write your own metaphor with the topic cats. If you need to review what a metaphor is or how to create one, you can go ahead and review the previous slides. Now we're going to talk about similes. A simile is kind of like a metaphor in that it compares two things, but a simile actually does use the word like or as. Some examples would be the clouds were as white and fluffy as cotton balls. Obviously, the clouds aren't made of cotton. That'd be ridiculous. But the sentence is comparing a cloud to a cotton ball in texture and the way it looks. So the clouds were as white and fluffy as cotton balls floating and moving in the sky. Our next example, her lilting music was like angels singing in heaven. Now I know that all you guys think that you can sing just as great as angels in heaven, but realistically you can't. So using a simile, in this case you could see like right here is the key phrase. It is comparing the singing to the sound that angels would actually make. Our third example is the oatmeal was bubbling and hot like magma in a volcano. Well, we have a lot of volcanoes around Quito, and you guys all know that there's not oatmeal inside, although that'd be kind of cool if there was. In this case, the oatmeal itself is being compared to the magma in a volcano because it's so hot. Obviously, it's not literally as hot as magma, otherwise it would melt the bowl and also your table and also the spoon and also probably your whole house and family. And it's not realistically going to be that hot, but this is another example of how a simile can show how similar two particular items are. Now for the activity for you, I want you to write a sentence that has a simile about the following topic: fast food. It could be about McDonald's, could be about anything, but I want you to make sure you use a simile. I'll give you an example that you cannot use. The hamburgers at McDonald's were as rubbery as a tire. That's an example. Compares the hamburger to a tire. Obviously it's not made of tire material, I hope. Otherwise you wouldn't be too healthy. Although you're not anyway after eating McDonald's. You get the idea. Write this on your worksheet. Okay, quick review. Metaphors are comparisons without like or as. They're usually stronger comparisons. And similes are comparisons that use like or as. And the activity for you, these sentences are written on your worksheet. And for the first part, I want you to identify which of the following sentences is a metaphor and which is a simile. Remember, like or as are usually going to be tied directly to a simile, and a more direct comparison is going to be a metaphor. For number two, you're going to look at the following sentences and underline the metaphor and circle the simile. The tree was a towering giant, with its crowning leaves like emerald hair, and the blue sea sparkled in the light like stars in the water, while the water was a mirror as people stared in. Very nice, pretty poetic language, but I need to see if you can tell the difference between a simile and a metaphor. That's it for this part of the flipped classroom activity. The next thing I need you to do is to go to this YouTube video, which is already linked on the class website, but in case it's not, I'm going to play it right here. And on the back of your paper, you have some guiding notes for that as well.
Mostly, I'm sure you're just wondering how long this will take, but I can assure you that in no time at all, you're going to be total experts on these fascinating figures of speech. Let's first start with a simple definition of simile. Joe Schmo here tells us that a simile is used to compare two unlike things using the phrases like or as. Let's take a closer look at Joe. For a stick figure, he seems like a smart, good-looking guy. But let's do him some real justice and describe how we really see him. We don't want to be boring and just say Joe is strong and smart. That's lame, really lame. Instead, we can use similes to be as descriptive as we want. We can say Joe is like a strong horse. What images pop into your mind when we use that phrase? That's right. We get a more vivid image and idea of the fact that Joe is a buff guy with big muscles. What if Joe has a really big brain and we think he is super intelligent? What can we compare him to? We could say Joe is as smart as an Einstein. This statement obviously lets us know that Joe is a serious smarty pants. Now that you've got similes down pat, let's take it up a notch and move to metaphors. Metaphors are a lot like similes, except that they compare things without using like or as. Also, metaphors make our comparisons more direct. So let's look at Joe and the horse again. Instead of saying he is like a horse, we can say Joe is a horse. What image do we get in our head? No, not a centaur Joe. Instead, we more explicitly understand Joe's strength. We can also interpret this metaphor to mean different things. That Joe is exactly like a horse in his strength, appearance, and appetite. See, more direct. How about another example? Look at Joe again. He's had a long, hard night, and he's a little cranky about having to wake up and go to work. Not to mention, Joe hasn't had his coffee, so he is certainly on edge. What do we think of Joe when we say he is like a zombie in the morning? That's right, we see a tired Joe who is not to be messed with. While Joe is obviously not his usual self, we understand that Joe will eventually perk up with a bit of coffee and be back to his old self. Now what happens when we turn our simile into a metaphor? How exactly do we do that? That is exactly right. We say Joe is a zombie in the morning. This image of Joe is far more frightening and lets us know in a more direct way that Joe is nowhere near himself. This metaphor gives us the image that we need to run away far and fast in the opposite direction. Make sure you run and don't stop because Crazy Joe will come after you. It's a scary sight to see. So let's do a little recapping. Similes compare two or more things using like or as. A metaphor compares two things without using like or as. Which one offers a more direct comparison? That's right, metaphor. Great job, you rock stars, you. And finally, what do you do when you either see someone like a zombie or someone who is a zombie? Run. Thank you very much for viewing my project on similes and metaphors. I hope you've learned a lot about figurative language and a little something on zombie safety.
So that concludes this part of today's flipped classroom activity. Make sure that you email me if you have any questions, and if not, be prepared to discuss the differences between similes and metaphors tomorrow.